Who is Dan Quayle? The people of Indiana know me.
Oh, I do not say.
And now, the nation will. See that? Don't panic.
He's a very different man from the intellectual midget that has been portrayed in much of the media.
I was very partial to Superman and Dennis the Menace comic books. I made a misstatement, and I stand by all my misstatements.
I don't think I could shoot a deer. Well, that's something else again.
Boy, you'd think that Danny had parted the Red Sea by the turnout at Nick's Kitchen whenever he visits for his latest political agenda. Nobody ever buys me a cup of coffee when I go home to visit. But I guess being named vice president isn't something that happens every day. Look, they even named a street after. Retrace the story. Dan had a Norman Rockwell childhood. Pollyanna would have thrown up. Well-to-do family, no deforming experiences, and he always loved golf. And he always wanted to be an astronaut. From an early age, Dan saw a way to combine these interests. Later on, he was appointed to head NASA. Can you believe it? He was appointed to run the space agency. And this is where he started to find out that things could be much more difficult than they looked.
The wrong color.
This is representative of the fine work of All-America and our aerospace programs, and delighted if you take it forward to the White House with you. Thank you. It's only a mock-up.
Dan hasn't actually gone into space yet, but I think he's still hoping to put a lunar landing on his resume.
Thank you very much, Bob, Mr. President, Mrs. Bush, Dick Truly, and fellow astronauts, and ladies and gentlemen.
Fellow astronauts?
Something wrong with fellow astronauts. That's not one. You've got one.
Mars is essentially in the same orbit as the Earth, somewhat the same distance from the sun. We have seen pictures where there are canals, we believe, and water. If there is water, that means there is oxygen. If oxygen, that means we can breathe. What? And with all these new buddies, there are bound to be some mix-ups, like the time he confused astronaut Buzz Aldrin with Congressman Buzz Lukens, a guy convicted of having sex with a 16-year-old girl.
As America celebrates the 20th anniversary of Neil Armstrong, Buzz Luken, walking on the moon.
Uh-oh.
I stand by all my misstatements. I think I know how I am to introduce myself. I stand at attention. Name, Dan Quayle. Rank, Sergeant. Serial number, 303-504096. Indiana National Guard, 6 years, and proud of it.
That's right. Dan wanted to serve his country. And joining the Indiana National Guard during Vietnam seemed like the obvious and easy choice.
I also served in kitchen patrol and peeled a lot of potatoes and things that other specialists do.
And if the Viet Cong, or hippies and protesters that come anywhere near Indianapolis, Dan would have been right there. Who among us could have told him that this perfectly honest Dodge could come back to haunt him so relentlessly?
I did not know in 1969 that I would be in this room today, I'll confess.
Dan is pretty unassuming about how he served his country, but no one else ever gets tired of hearing about it.
The Cleveland Plain Dealers report today that, in fact, the Indiana National Guard was over manpower, not under.
That is not true. There was no influence used. I didn't have to use any influence because before I applied there were openings, when I applied there were openings, and after I applied there were openings. Those are the facts. And if you're interested in the facts, there they are. At that age, you call home. You call home to mother and father and say, I'd like to get in the National Guard. Those are the facts.
There was a feeding flurry in the water out there. You know I like blue fishing. And have you ever seen them when they just squirming all around and feeding in a frenzy? That's exactly what was happening.
Those are the facts.
Did someone act on your behalf to get you into the National Guard?
During the war in Vietnam, you had a chance to seek active service, like many other members of your generation, and you didn't. You chose service in the National Guard.
Did you have to have any help getting into the Guard?
Okay, let me tell you. You're going back 20 years.
Right.
Let me say this. I was very interested in getting into the Indiana National Guard.
And I'm sure that I let a number of people know that I was interested. Those are the facts. And if you're interested in the facts, there they are.
Senator, do you have a hearing problem?
I think George had it nailed. Bluefish is right. It was a feeding frenzy. So how did Dan and his handlers respond to the pressure? Well, they decided to go out and seek a friendly group of reporters, average age 13, to lob some softballs at the vice president.
What if we do have to go back to the draft? What if, you know, the American people don't believe in the war? There's a lack of volunteers, and we do have to resort to the draft. You don't think that the country would need me to fight more than to be in the National Guard?
That we're going to have peace, not conflict. So your hypothetical won't even occur.
Go along with the premise of our question. Let's suppose that there is a war and he is drafted and he has a friend whose father can get him into the National Guard and out of the draft.
The war is not inevitable. As a matter of fact, we're going to do the right things to make sure that we have peace.
Wow, even these kids are in on this Bluefish thing. What gives? Why is everybody always picking on Dan? When a guy like Dan Quayle comes along, I gotta believe he's a little refreshing. Sure, he was known as Florida's 3rd senator because he spent so much time there golfing. And I know he once proposed legislation that would have given a tax break to golf pros, but big deal. In a day and age when so many politicians are crooks or philanderers or both, Dan can't even get in trouble with any kind of authority. He can't even get a speeding ticket. His big worry is that someone might get a hold of his college grades. That is so mild, it's actually charming. And I think we should all be a little bit grateful.
When I go to work at Wendy's, I would have to release my grades. Now, you're running for the 2nd highest office in the nation, which is obviously holds much more responsibility than dishing up hamburgers at Wendy's. So, why aren't you releasing your grades?
I have said that I will seriously consider releasing my grades when everybody else does.
But what kind of role model are you going to be? Are you going to stand up and give a speech to America's youth saying, you know, if you aspire to someday be president or vice president, you know, you can slide on your grades, it really doesn't matter?
No, absolutely. And I tell my children that to study hard, and I use my experience as a good example.
Dan has every reason to feel that we just don't know him well enough. And if we did, we'd have to like him. Hasn't everybody else?
The American people are getting a little bit sick and tired. They want to know who Dan Quayle is. I'm going to view this as a great opportunity to just be Dan Quayle and let the American people see Dan Quayle as I really am.
Should we worry that Dan Quayle is not qualified enough on the golf course?
No. Why? Because he's a fine man and well qualified for the job.
I think he's going to make an excellent vice president, and I believe that he's going to be a popular vice president just as soon as the people of this country see him as he is.
I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
You take the UNCF motto that what a waste it is to lose one's mind or not to have a mind is being very wasteful. How true that is. We understand the importance of having the bondage between the parent and the child. And believe
Did he say bondage?
We understand the importance of having the bondage
He said bondage.
the parent and the child. Millions of innocent people lost their lives because of the bigotry and Hitlerism that permeated Germany and other parts of the world. It was an obscene period in our nation's history.
I'd like to follow up on two things. One, you said it was just now about the Holocaust, it was an obscene period in our nation's history. Was that, you didn't mean to say that?
No, not our nation's, but in World War II. I mean, we all lived in this century. I didn't live in this century, but in this century's history. It is a point of history that this nation, our nation, understands. We did not have, matter of fact, we fought Hitlerism